Hello, my name is Wendell Page, and I am privileged to be the subject of this documentary. I was asked to tell you a little bit about the last 50 years or so of my life, and I'm going to start all the way back, obviously, in the beginning. I'm a proud baby boomer, the classic baby boomer. However, I had the pleasure of looking at this and growing up through this through the years as an African American, which has its challenges as far as each of the decades may have been concerned. I started out, again, your typical 1950s baby. We were born probably the last real bastion of segregation in America. My childhood was spent with a lot of colored drinking fountains and white drinking fountains, and it was, you can't enter in the front door. You have to go through the back door. You couldn't ride on the front of the bus. You had to ride in the back of the bus. You name it as far as segregation in the South here in Florida, and I had the privilege of experiencing that. Sometimes it was good as far as I gained some advantages by manipulating my status, and then other times it was very bad because, as we've learned during these days, that Black Lives Matter. But back when I was born, we had nothing. My parents were tenant farmers, migrant farmers, citrus pickers, potato farmers, you name it. And we did all the agricultural, domestic kinds of work that we were limited to in my community in the 50s. The whole decade of the 50s. And into the 60s, the lights started to come on in a lot of ways. And I got to go back because I said I was a classic baby boomer. I was very privileged to see a lot of firsts as a baby boomer. We like to say that we are the greatest generation because we invented so many different things. We achieved so many different things. I remember we were too poor to have a television, but when we finally got a television, it wasn't much bigger than these cell phones kids are carrying today. Black and white. It went off at midnight, and there was no more TV until 6 o'clock the next morning. I saw the transistor radio. Kids now can plug into all kinds of different platforms that play music and do things. When I was growing up, a transistor radio was the going thing. It was about the size of a box of Cracker Jacks. And it sounded terrible. The speakers cracked all the time, and if you were too far away, particularly from the black radio station, you couldn't get it at all. Because the black radio station obviously had less watts, less power than most of its peers or colleagues in the industry. So I'm happy that we were able to do the things that we were able to do, as baby boomers now, as a generation. And I'm happy to know that we survived the 50s and became a more enlightened society even in the 60s. In the 60s, we had this movement that everybody should love everybody. I guess you could call us hippies or whatever in those days. And now I became a part of the group of kids who actually began to integrate the schools. We were a group of first 12 or 14 or so of us who went to our local Winter Park High School. And I went in as a ninth grader, I believe. But I integrated the schools there and subsequently graduated from the schools there and on an integrated basis. I remember there was a flood of African American students that went to Winter Park High the first day. I mean, we had a bunch of kids, but by the second day, it was down to 14. So that's the 50s and the 60s, kind of, sort of. For me personally, what happened was that I graduated from high school. I became the first person in my family to graduate, my immediate family to graduate from college. And then I went on to pursue my professional career. Here again, the 60s played an important part because there started to be a discussion about what was and what would be affirmative action. And affirmative action, whether we like it or not, everybody has their own opinions about it, opened the doors for a lot of people. A lot of folks were promoted because the greater population, the minority population, was forced to take a look at the talents and skills of African Americans in particular. They were forced to do it. There was judges who had come down and supported, even from a legal perspective, that if you had a qualified individual that could do the job in America, it was against the law not to give them an opportunity to compete for that job. So we made such great strides in what we were doing, and I had progressed. I had gotten to the point where I was no longer picking oranges or working on the farm or doing whatever I needed to do to help my mom and dad, to actually having internships. I had several internships to do things that allowed me to see that the world was bigger than my own hood. And culturally, I thought that it was one of the biggest changes. Music was the key, I think, to all of this transition. I remember I began to love symphony music. I had watched The Lone Ranger as one of my favorite cowboys in the 50s and didn't realize that the theme song to The Lone Ranger was Beethoven's Fifth, which is also, symphony music. So I loved symphony music. And then, as a result of having integrated, I became, I was a big Jimi Hendrix fan and a big Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young fan. From Jimi Hendrix to James Taylor, my musical dimensions expanded. And of course, there was always the Motown sound and the sounds of Stevie Wonder as an advocate for a lot of the freedom marches and things like that. Aretha Franklin and gospel music and its transition to R&B. It was quite a time for, and through music, people started to integrate more. You start to see more people of color at rock festivals where Jimi Hendrix was playing, and you started to see more other major populations at the James Brown shows. So music was bringing people together, and I can't give music enough credit for helping move the 60s. And we kind of wound out the 60s in a transition again as America became somewhat divided as a result of the Vietnam War. I got drafted for the Vietnam War. I'm a Vietnam era veteran, a veteran of the 82nd Airborne, I might say proudly. But I didn't ask for that military opportunity. I was drafted and had no choice as a male, single, young male at 19 years old, was prime target. So I got after integrating high school and had actually started college and got drafted out of my first year of college into the service. And then I went on to serve my country. It made a man out of me. I thought that my years in service were some of the most dynamic years of my life as I learned to kind of fend for myself. I moved through ranks pretty quickly. I went from private to sergeant in about a year and a half. Many of my peers and my colleagues had 20 years of service, 12 years of service, 15 years of service, whatever the case may be. So I felt pretty proud of myself for what I had achieved as an airborne paratrooper, able to jump out of airplanes and helicopters and all that stuff, a squad leader. I had the lives of other men in my hands as a sergeant. So it was pretty dynamic period as I closed out the 60s, headed into the 70s. The 70s, I complete my college education and I graduate out and I'm off into the world to find out what am I going to do now. And so I got to tell you, I came out of school at a time when there was kind of a recession going on. There weren't a lot of jobs. And again, I have to tell you, honestly, affirmative action saved my bahukas because I was looking for a job. I actually, because I had obligations and responsibilities, by the time I got out of college, I had to take the first jobs I could get. And believe me, they were well below college degree. They were working in restaurants. I was a cook. I was a salad guy. I was a dishwasher. I had all these, restaurant jobs and down in South Florida trying to make ends meet. But affirmative action came along one day and I read in the paper where the Xerox Corporation was looking to interview new sales executives. So I decided, since I had a college degree and I had somewhat of a gift to gab, I would go to Xerox and see if I could make the cut. I go to Xerox, I get there for the interview, the line is around the block. And there are hundreds of people trying to interview for these jobs. And something tells me to leave, something tells me to stay. Ultimately, I stayed. And they hired 10 new sales executives as a result of that effort. And I was one of the 10 that got hired. But I made a cut. I took the cut. I was grateful for it. Got great training from the Xerox Corporation in those days. They were like the Blue Ribbon Company of the world when it came to training and education of employees. And so I was in that cut. I was, really enjoying the corporate life. Gave me a taste for the corporate life. I didn't ever want to go back to other jobs. So I stayed to Xerox for a while, and I decided then that sales was too political for me. I mean, a lot of the sales that were made, the big sales, had political connections, and I wasn't, even though I have a degree in political science, I wasn't interested in going that route. So I looked to change jobs, and I changed jobs moving from the Xerox Corporation to the Bell Corporation. Now, in my estimation, the Bell Corporation was on the same level as the Xerox Corporation, and even bigger, because there was all of these baby bells that had been established across the country. The government had come in and said that the Bell system and AT&T were too much of a monopoly, and it actually commanded that it be broken up. And so the Bell Company became Southern Bell and Northeastern Bell and Pacific Bell. They all became their own corporations because they were just that big the government wanted them broken up. So the judge said if you're going to break them up, they have to have a solid program in place to diversify their workforce. Okay, I heard about that. So I go over to the Bell system, and behold, I get a job with the Bell system. Worked in the Bell system as a corporate manager for a number of years, and had an opportunity as we moved from the 70s into the 80s, where minority businesses and women-owned businesses were gaining more traction. I was approached by a minority-owned business out of San Francisco to move from corporate manager at Bell System to to president of their corporation, President-Florida, as they were expanding. They had made the Black Enterprise Top 100 businesses years before, consecutive years before, and I was convinced that it was time for a career change. I became president of Florida. Well, that gave me a taste for the really significant salaries that people are making out there. And for a while there, I was able to command that kind of compensation because, one of our major contracts was NOAA, which is the National Organization of Aeronautical and Aeronautics. But they tracked the hurricanes and everything for the U.S. government. Anyway, worked in corporate America, and then I became specifically interested in minority and women business enterprises. Had the privilege of becoming the president and CEO of one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the state of Florida that addresses the needs of minorities and women businesses, and is a part of a national network of these organizations. So I championed that for a number of years. That was my passion. That was my absolute passion, helping others, understanding where I came from the orange groves and migrant farms and tenant farms of Florida, to president and CEO of anything I thought was a significant move. So I was more than willing to give back for what I had received. And I did that for a number of years. Actually, from that point, for the next 40 years, I would be working some way or another with women, minority, small businesses, helping to develop their economic and their presence, if you will, their economic development and their presence in the community at large. You hear the old adage of, rising water raises all ships. I really believe that. So I figured if America was growing and doing, I'd seen it do so many great things over the years, for these computer-aged, cell phone working, all of the things that are going on now. I've seen them move from transistor radios to this stuff, and it's absolutely unbelievable. But if we're going to develop at that rate and at that level, there should be some plan in place to carry all of the people up with the country. So I spent the next 40 years working in that area. I worked at nonprofit for a while in the 80s, and toward the end of the 90s, after having put all that time in, I get a call from the governor of Florida, who was Jeb Bush at the time, and a future presidential candidate, to come and work on his team and be in charge specifically of the economic development of minorities and women businesses and small businesses in the state of Florida. And I subsequently had to move to Tallahassee to be close to the governor, close to the team, close to my office. And I took over the state responsibilities in making that happen. I worked 2 terms with the governor. He was 2 terms. He was term limited out after 8 years. And I decided to move on and start my own company. So this stage of my life has been very, very good. I've had a chance to reflect and look back over the years, look back over the decades to see how things have changed. And I have to say that they are honestly better. And things have happened for me that have been just wonderful. I had a good professional career uh, for 40 years. I uh, was able to run my business successfully as an entrepreneur. And then, the things in my personal life, like I married my beautiful wife more than 20 years ago. And I am the father to some beautiful, wonderful, productive women, ladies who are my daughters. Um, I pledge Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, which is one of the largest black male organizations in America. And I've just been able to do so many wonderful things. I think I've been to every state in the United States with the exception of Alaska and Hawaii. So I'm very proud. Now I set my own agendas for the day. Well, is select. If I choose to do something, I will. Other than that, I am retired officially, and I am enjoying every minute of it. Down through the years, the Lord has been good to me, and I'm very happy that it has been the journey that it has.